Value Impulses with Dr. Ulrich Vogel. Personnel Diagnostics Insights, Leadership, Assessments, and Personnel Development. A warm welcome to all our listeners. Today, I've brought along an exciting topic. It's something that's been on my mind for many years, the topic of the profiling feedback conversation. That's really the main benefit we deliver at Profiling Values. This is the central, vehicle, the core methodology to create value for people, to truly benefit them. Right. And that's why the title is addressed directly to you, How do you conduct a profiling feedback conversation so that you not only meet but exceed expectations? Expectations are often high, which makes it challenging to surpass them. Sometimes expectations aren't actually that high, and people end up absolutely thrilled. But I'd also like to say, at this point, that this is, in a way, the meaning behind my work. Every day I get to give a feedback conversation is honestly a really good day for me. I've given thousands over the decades, many thousands, and I never get bored of it, because here I have the chance to help people understand themselves better and get more out of themselves. And I think that's something truly valuable, which you can do as well, especially as a certified profiling values practitioner. You might even get a few extra tips and bits of info now. But even if you haven't trained with us, I think you can still take something away from this. I'll dive into the topic now, and then I want to take a look at setting the framework a bit. Then we'll also conduct a comprehensive examination of this three-point communication to really understand the intricate ways in which these channels function in order to gain deeper insight. I'll provide a detailed explanation regarding the imagery and metaphors that we use as essential tools for gaining further insight. And it's also important not to fall too much into making assumptions. That can backfire, so it's better to see the whole thing as clues and to view this third point I'm talking about as a source of inspiration. It's also really important to bring everything together at the end, the big points. I'll touch on those again as well. And yes, to create a space for reflection and integration, because a feedback conversation is often just the beginning and never really something that's meant to be the end, or should be. And I'm incredibly gratified that I've already been able to help so many people initiate a meaningful process of personal and professional change with the very commencement of such a feedback conversation. What is the goal of a feedback conversation on a meta level? We just have to be clear that the importance of feedback conversations is simply a part of personal and professional development, right? When we look at the meta level, the true purpose of a feedback conversation is to help people tap more into their potential, right? And it's less about evaluation or diagnosis, but rather about helping to spark a process of self-awareness, or, as they say in English, insight is a nice term for it, That shows that insight comes from within, right? And it can't just be prescribed like maybe a medication. But we have to serve as conversation partners here, as a sounding board, as a surface for reflection and projection. And we humans are wired in such a way that we need that. We don't develop on our own. We only find our I through the you. So, the overarching goal is to help the participants grow through their own insights, right? And that's a process that we can only kick off with facts, with questions, with vivid comparisons, but ultimately it has to come from within. Let's take a look at how to set the framework for a feedback conversation. I always think you have to combine structure with flexibility, So, a clear structure, but a clear, simple structure creates a solid foundation, but still stays flexible enough to respond to individual needs, right? And we always have to keep this basic learning psychology in mind as well. How do we actually learn? We learn through trial and error, every day, right? We say, this works, that doesn't work, and then it goes, then we're wiser, one experience richer. But of course, we also accumulate knowledge and also experiences, that we have, and then we learn something and then we forget it again. That's where training often plays a role. But what really has the strongest impact, when it comes to learning, are those insights we have, that light bulb moment, And that moment of realization is often not something you can control directly, right? But it can be stimulated through targeted prompts, and that's exactly where the person giving feedback creates a space where at some point, that light bulb moment can happen. So, what might a rough structure like that look like? Yeah, so maybe I say, okay, we're going to dive into the results now. With profiling values, there's a specific page that's important, page 5, and I spend more time on that one. I go through the other pages a bit more quickly, and then at the end, I like to distill all the information from the algorithm down to a few takeaways, just a few key points. And in between, I might ask a few questions or toss the ball over to you. Please, dear participant, feel completely free to ask questions or make comments at any time. That way, we can interact well. That's really all we need. And with that, we can get started. So, I mentioned the 3-point communication. What does that mean? Well, the first and most important point is, of course, the participant and their perceptions, their experiences, and their reflections, right? The second point is you, as the feedback giver, the one providing impulses and guidance, without dictating anything, right? There should never be any judgment coming across. That would be completely out of line. And the third point is, well, basically the psychometric result that's on the table, and which ultimately serves as a neutral anchor for the discussion. And this third point, very important, is neither the absolute truth lying there, nor a crystal ball, you know. It's simply a completely neutral reference that offers clues and indications, and serves as a starting point for reflection and insight, right? And with profiling values, we have these sorts of rankings, these orders of precedence, and I often tell people, it's actually a bit paradoxical. You described yourself through the sorting process, without knowing how you were describing yourself, because you couldn't see through the algorithm. That's why you had a completely unfiltered view of yourself. And now we've basically evaluated that inhabit there, with all its uncertainties, but it's a basis for discussion, right? And instead of saying, the profile shows that you are such and such or whatever, you could say, right, so here, the algorithm suggests a certain tendency, towards self-criticism, just to give an example. What experiences have you had with that yourself, So, in this way, the third point remains an anchor in the conversation that promotes self-awareness without actually being fixed. And you can also, be a lot bolder at this point, so also point things out yourself, After, for example, during our profiling values session, he explained what the bars and diamonds are, and what the outer value space is, that is, the worldview, and what the inner one is, the self-view, right? And I had, a really, really great partner as well, who often, explained the mechanics like that and then immediately passed the ball over to the participant. So, what do you see there on page 5? Right. So this 3-point communication is really a good anchor, in your mind, to see how the whole thing works, runs, and then how the balls can also, be played. Let's take a look at the next point, language imagery, metaphors as tools, for gaining insight. They create impressions that not only can be understood, but also felt, and because of that, of course, they stick in your memory better, they spark a light, and often allow for deeper insights than just a plain explanation. So, a classic example I often use with profiling values, when someone scores really high on self-efficacy, on the internal locus of control, so someone who wants to shape things, feels their own impact, and has a really strong inner motivation, then I often say, you've got the KVP gene. Then people say, KVP, what's that? A continuous improvement process. It's a lean management method from the technical industry. And what does it mean if someone has it? The continuous improvement, process, gene, so to speak, the KVP gene, means that this person always wants to understand even better what they're doing, wants to get better at it, and wants to draw out their best performance from within themselves. Or another example, someone who's in a phase of orientation, right, so their attention is really focused on, where am I headed with myself and my life? But at the same time, there's not much clarity, And then you could say, hey, sometimes or right now, you're kind of standing in the fog, but the spotlight is shining right on the question, where is your life going? And with this spotlight and this fog, it suddenly becomes totally clear to people what it's all about, Or with people who are really skeptical, always towards their surroundings, we've got a few things at play there too. Don't assume there's a sniper hiding behind every bush. That's often one of those things that, triggers something. So, the choice of metaphors is crucial, because they shape the feeling of the conversation and often can build a direct bridge to insight, You could also say, if someone has been dissatisfied in their role for a long time or too long, love it, change it, or leave it. Yeah, so if you can't change it but you stay, then it eats away at you and eventually you'll get sick. Or, yeah, there are people who are very direct, and you can tell them straight up that they didn't invent diplomacy and maybe could work a bit on their empathy. So instead of presenting fixed hypotheses, this is the point I want to address now. Hypotheses, clues. I prefer to talk about clues that encourage reflection. Yeah, you often get tempted a bit. This happens a lot with our certified users, where they say, well, because the goal orientation isn't clear at the moment, that means it's practical thinking behavior, and that's why, right now, self-confidence is limited, and so on. Careful, careful, careful with those kinds of causal chains. It could just as easily be the other way around. So it's better to look at it like this. Hey, here or here we've got a score that points to a risk of getting scattered, maybe trying to do a bit too much at once. What does that trigger in you? Yeah. And then the participant can share their own thoughts about it, right? Or also, when it comes to a high diamond in structured thinking, in our system, that's a perfectionist streak. Be careful with how you phrase things, yeah. So, if you make too many hypotheses, and 1, 2, or 3 of them turn out to be wrong, then you immediately lose credibility in the conversation. Let me get to the point about big points in a summary. So, a precise review of the essentials, that at the end of the conversation, you bundle together what you consider to be the most important points in a clear and concise summary. There's no right or wrong here. At this moment, you're the advisor, taking everything you've worked out in your preparation, plus the impressions from the conversation, and you put together, let's say, 2 to 5 big points, and it shouldn't be more than that. People can't remember more than that. So they're like little beacons for orientation. You could call them that, yeah. And this third point always remains a reference, right, to help structure the understanding of the other person in the conversation, and the insight comes through the other person's reflection. What are some examples of big points? Yeah, for example, what you do should really excite you. Feel where that's possible for you. So that's, a kind of role redesign that's in there. Take a look at your role with your heart, hands, and mind, and the heart aspect, it doesn't seem to be fully emotionally identified at the moment. See how you might be able to adjust and adapt that. Or the point about positioning, which often comes up. So, to say, hey, try to gain influence beyond just your formal role. What does it mean to do good and also to talk about it appropriately? That's a big point. Or self-appreciation, like saying, hey, you're not exactly known for patting yourself on the back in front of others all the time. But maybe you should pat yourself on the back a bit more often. You can do that alone in private. Take a moment to pause and be proud of what you do, because that's good for you too. And only if you're doing well yourself can you keep doing good for others in the long run. And, always the question at the end, what do you see as the next step? What are your next points? And really getting across to people that gaining insight is a process, one that develops through practice, experiences, and those aha moments. So as feedback givers, we help create that space for insight as a process. But the insight itself has to come from within, like the proverbial light we ignite so that the participant can recognize it for themselves. What are my final thoughts? Time flies, and so does the long-term impact of feedback and insights. I've boiled it down to 3 points here. At the end of the feedback conversation, it's about each participant understanding a bit more about themselves. That they get some light bulb moments and maybe even develop a new sense of their own possibilities. First thought, Second thought, the final message could also be, only those who recognize and understand themselves can reach their full potential. So, good feedback conversations are just one part of this journey, a chance to spark the insights and realizations that are inside every person. And third, the profiling conversation takes on a deeper, more meta level and is more than just simple feedback. It's really already a coaching process, one that encourages insights and motivates people to recognize and develop their own potential. Thank you so much for sticking with me right to the end. I'm looking forward to your feedback, and especially hope you'll join me for the next episodes as well. Thanks, and see you soon.